So the concept of expressing versus reporting, for me, is one of the most powerful, potent ideas in circling, ideas and practices within the context of circling. So I guess I'll just describe it first and go from there. To report on my experience is to talk about it in a disembodied way. So if I'm feeling angry, for example, instead of really embodying and feeling the emotional energy of anger and expressing from that place in a more honest and direct way, I'll talk about my anger. I might say something like, I notice I feel angry, instead of, I feel fucking angry right now, and actually letting myself and bring the honest energy that's behind the words. So yeah, that's reporting on my experience rather than expressing from my experience. The way that I kind of view this is that it's ideal to have the capacity to do both, in that it allows for greater behavioral flexibility and the power and skill to be able to communicate what I want to communicate. For example, in some environments, maybe it's useful to report on my experience a bit more and have that ability to mindfully witness and notice what I'm feeling. I'm not repressing it, but I'm also not needing to overindulge in it or cathart it out. I can just notice, I'm feeling some sadness right now, or I'm feeling some anger. It's actually useful to be able to just sit with the experience and put language to it without going into it. In some contexts, like I'm at work and having this charged interaction with my boss or someone in some sort of work context, or there's a fight that breaks out somewhere, and I try and step in and mediate, and I'm feeling a lot of sadness and fear and anger. Let's say there's a lot of emotion flowing through me, but I want to appear very calm and neutral such that I can diffuse the situation. It's quite useful to be able to report on my experience. Though that's as a capacity or way of communicating, it seems more pervasive in our culture to report on our experience rather than expressing from it. So in circling, we're actually endeavoring to go in the opposite direction, which is to reclaim the disowned, disembodied flavors of our experience in service of greater intimacy with self and other. Yeah, so as a circling facilitator, I think part of our job is to, one, model really expressing from our experience in a way that's intimate, vulnerable, honest, and safe, to model that for others and to invite it from them. I've seen some people attempting to really figure this distinction out and kind of going too far on the other side of the spectrum to this place of I feel something, I have to express it immediately and without consent or context, which I guess is kind of like a learning curve, whatever. But ideally, for me, there is some degree of buy-in if I want to express something with greater intensity in the context of a circle. For example, I'm circling my friend. He says something that's quite triggering for me. I might say, hey, are you open to hearing impact? Creating some sort of micro consent, checking in. And I might even pre-frame the expression by saying, somehow what you said triggers something in me or reminds me of my father or whatever. So there's some emotion here, and I want to bring it all in service of connection with you and learning about myself. If the other person, buys in or gives consent, I might say oh, fuck, man, I feel annoyed and angry and upset and I'm judging you. I can bring the fullness of my experience by kind of owning it more deeply beforehand and gaining some sort of consent. So I think there are ways to embrace this distinction of expressing versus reporting that are more conducive to safety, and some ways of doing it that are a little bit less conducive to safety. And yeah, I think our job as facilitators to both model and also support and facilitate others in feeling more freedom to really embody what they feel. And there's some ideal balance for me of on one side of the spectrum being too disembodied and exclusively reporting on my experience from a place of non-constructive fear and constriction. That's one side. The other side is an the shadow of the other side of the spectrum is an inability to self-regulate or sit with my experience such that whatever I feel has to be overindulged in immediately and sort of takes priority over other people's experience. There's some sweet spot of the two of like, I feel something and I want to bring it and I can still put language to my experience in a way that is skillful. So I think that's like what I aspire to when I'm exploring this distinction, is to like bring it fully and to bring it with a reasonable degree of safety, and to like essentially like bring my experience but not try and like shame others or enact violence on them in the process.